gbenews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates.
You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A very good evening to you. Welcome to GBN Tonight with me, Martin Daubney. Well, he's in. It's official. Nigel Farage has been sworn in as a Member of Parliament in the House of Commons. We'll talk more about that later. We've also got some exclusive, unmissable footage for you of migrants taking off from France as they head towards the UK. The shocking footage sees women and children simply left behind in the sea. Women and children first, not to this lot. We'll also go live to America, where Keir Starmer has been talking to our political editor, Christopher Hope, following his meeting with the US President. Chris asked him if Joe Biden is fit to stand against Donald Trump again.
He was on good form, and we covered
4 more years,
ground.
no problem.
Well, look, he was on very good form, and I was very pleased to have that opportunity to discuss these issues with him.
And should businesses hire more former prisoners to cut reoffending and also overcrowding in prisons? Well, Labour are proposing it. We'll also discuss that. Well, the show, always a complete pleasure to have your company. Now, get in touch with your thoughts on tonight's topics by going to gbnews.com/your say. It's your show. I read the best out before the end of it. But first, here's your headlines with Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you very much, and good evening to you. It's just after 7 o'clock. The top story tonight: police are still waiting to speak to Carl Clifford in connection with the murders of 3 members of the same family. He is currently in a serious condition in hospital. The 26-year-old was found near a cemetery in North London yesterday after a major manhunt. Earlier in Enfield, police retrieved what appear to be 2 hard drives and bags of documents from a house connected to their investigation. It's understood a crossbow has also been recovered by police during their searches. Carl Clifford is wanted for the deaths of Carol Hunt, the wife of BBC commentator John Hunt, and 2 of their daughters. Another major manhunt is underway after 2 suitcases containing human remains were left on Bristol's Clifton Suspension Bridge, with police saying they've seized a taxi as part of their inquiries. Officers have now released a description of the suspect who travelled there by taxi last night and dropped off the luggage. He has a beard, dressed in black, and was wearing a backpack at the time the photos of him were taken. Officers were called last night to reports of that man acting suspiciously and say they're now urgently working to identify and find him. The bridge remains closed in Bristol while specialist investigators scour the scene, and it's understood an investigation is now underway to identify the remains. Double child killer Colin Pitchfork's next parole hearing will no longer be held in public after new and fresh allegations. He was jailed for life for the rape and murder of 2 15-year-old girls in Leicester in the 80s. The hearing was due to take place this week, but has been adjourned, with the parole board saying, as I said, there have been fresh, they say relatively recent allegations relating to the risk that he poses. The Prime Minister has brushed off concerns that his plans to release prisoners early to ease overcrowded jails could see a crime wave across the country. His new government's proposing to free inmates after serving just 40% of their sentences. It's expected Sir Keir Starmer will authorise the emergency measures this week. And it comes after he said he was shocked at the levels of overcrowding in prisons, admitting it was worse than he first thought. And the Prime Minister has also said that Joe Biden is on top form after holding talks together at the NATO summit in Washington, despite concerns by some that the president is too old to be in office. It comes as Sir Keir Starmer's new government is planning to bring in measures here in the UK to force peers to retire at the age of 80 in a bid to cut down what he's called the bloated size of the chamber. But in an interview with GBNews earlier, Sir Keir Starmer steered clear of commenting directly on the president's age.
He was on good form, and we covered
4 more years, no problem.
Well, look, he was on very good form, and I was very pleased to have that opportunity to discuss these issues with him, and not least this question of our special relationship, which is very important to him, very important to me, and very important to our two countries.
Sir Keir Starmer there speaking to our political editor Chris Hope earlier. And finally, water companies in England and Wales have said that planned bill rises won't be enough to tackle sewage spills. That's after the regulator Ofwat approved annual averages increasing of £19 per year, a third less than water firms had requested. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sam Francis, back with you for another roundup at 8 o'clock.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam. Now, before our first story tonight, let's take a look at a moment the commentariat hoped they'd never see. Yes, here is the man, Nigel Farage, being sworn in as the Member of Parliament for Clacton, taken early today in the House of Commons.
Hello, I'd like to stand on the mic. Can I ask you your name and constituency, please?
Nigel Paul Farage, Clacton.
And would you like to swear or affirm?
I'd like to swear, please.
On which holy book?
The King James's Bible, please.
And if I can read that one?
Yes. I swear by Almighty God that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to His Majesty the King Charles, his heirs and successors, according to law, so help me God.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If you'd like to pass it on to my colleague. Thank you.
And you can almost hear the heads rotating, can't you, at the BBC, at the dinner parties in North London. 8 times Nigel Farage tried, 8th time lucky. There it is. That's his moment forever in history. The infamous 5, as Lee Anderson said at the start of the week, the fox is in the chicken pen. Now, moving on, we've got some shocking exclusive footage for you right now on the show. Taken this morning, you can now see migrants in Gravelines, northern France, take off in a dinghy. Now, police appear to be simply looking on. Look at the gendarmes there, posing for selfies by looking on as many of the immigrants struggle to even board that small boat. 1 or 2 of the French coppers can even be seen filming the migrants taking off as they head to our shores, making the precarious journey across the channel. Look at that. That craft can barely cope with the weight. It's bending, it's undulating. They're swimming more and more onto that. The police simply looking on. No attempt whatsoever to stop that craft. And remember, last year, Rishi Sunak pledged to give the French police £500 million to deal with those migrant crossings. You can see how weighed down that boat is, including women and small children. They fail to successfully get onto that boat. The migrants are sitting on the edge of the boat with their legs dangling into the water, so to ensure the maximum amount of people can get on. Typically, there are about 50 migrants to every boat. And of course, this is less than a week into Keir Starmer's tenure as Prime Minister. Forget stop the boat. Sir Keir has promised to smash the gangs, and he has already scrapped the previous government's Rwanda plan, which some said was a deterrent. Shocking pictures there of women and children in the shallows simply being overlooked. Women and children first. That used to be the first rule of sea. Totally ignored on that beach in this exclusive footage. Setting off towards Dover, as we can see, yet another small boat. Shocking, shocking scenes. Now I'm joined now by the former Chief Immigration Officer in Calais for UK Border Force, Kevin Saunders. Kevin, that footage there will no doubt come as no surprise to you. Another ordinary day on the beaches of France. In fact, we've now seen 484 illegal immigrants arrive since Sir Keir Starmer became the Prime Minister, including 419 on a single day on Tuesday. And Kevin, the weather ahead is looking to be very, very calm next week. And you know exactly what that means. There are going to be more and more of these boats coming over during that period.
Yes, there are, Martin. I'm afraid you're right. I mean, if you go back to Tuesday, you've only told half the story. 419 got across, which you're right. The French managed to intercept another 126. So, over 500 tried to do it. And there, by the grace of God, the French were able to stop 3 of the boats coming across. So that's a little bit of a result, but not a very big one, because 400 plus got over. Do we know if that boat that you filmed got over?
And Kevin, Sir Keir Starmer himself has said the numbers are going up, not down. Well, that's just an admission of reality. And Kevin Saunders, we've spoken so many times about the deterrent. We all agree Rwanda had its imperfections, but nevertheless, offshore containment was that deterrent. On day one, that was removed. Kevin Saunders, you've been warning for months and months and months. Without offshore containment, without a deterrent, the numbers are guaranteed to go up.
Oh, the numbers are going to go. Yes, well, they will go up. They will go up indeed. And as you say, so rightly say, with the weather due to get better this week, we will see an awful lot more coming across the channel. The migrants are there. They're waiting to come across. The pictures that you've got are not reassuring, are they? It doesn't look as though the French were doing too much at all to try and stop that boat.
And Kevin Saunders, what do you make of the pictures we saw there of women and children in the shallows being completely ignored by those already on that dinghy? They're not being helped in any capacity. You can see them there in the foreground in those orange life jackets. The women and children simply being ignored. And I guess this is just survival of the fittest, survival of those who want it the most. And Kevin, of course, back in April, 5 people died in a situation very, very similar to this one we're seeing on our screens right now, when the men, they marauded onto the boat and people were killed in the crush, including a girl aged 4 and a woman in her 30s.
Yes, it is a ruthless, absolutely ruthless organisation that's going on there. As you can see, it is basically the survival of the fittest. The women and children aren't going to have much chance getting on there, but perhaps in some way that's not a bad thing. At least they'll be safe in France, rather than coming across the channel. And coming across from Gravelines is a very, very dangerous crossing. You can see already in your picture how strong the currents actually are. So. That's going to be that's a really dangerous crossing coming there.
And Kevin, as well as that lack of deterrent that we talked about with Rwanda, dead and buried on day one, there are numerous TikTok videos going out offering cut price deals, 2-for-1 offers. There's such a huge amount of money in this grotesque industry, Kevin Saunders. And you told me the other day there's a new nickname for Sir Keir Starmer in the camps on French beaches.
Yes, that's right. The migrants are very pleased, particularly the Kurds. I think they're calling him the friendly one, because they believe that it's going to be much, much easier now for them to come across and settle in the UK. And basically, they're right. It is going to be. It's going to be awful. The next few weeks, if the weather stays fine, we're going to see a lot of people come across.
And Kevin, a lot of people who are opposed not just to the arrival of the illegal immigrants in Britain, but also to this horrible, horrible industry, we're the ones who don't want to see disasters in the Channel. Kevin, with more and more people coming and trying to get over to make that precarious, death-defying mission, do you fear that we might see yet more disasters in the Channel?
Yes, I think it's inevitable that we will. I mean, it's so ruthless what is going on in the Channel. We saw it on your film, the survival of the fittest. You know, these young men virtually elbowing other people out of the way to get on the boats. And so, yeah, there are going to be a lot more deaths. I mean, that boat is massively overloaded. And you can see that the sea, you can see the white horses on the waves there. So that's not a particularly calm sea. And if that boat went down with 60-odd people on it, there would be a number of deaths, wouldn't there?
Yeah, Bob, I reckon, Kevin, when we look at that picture there's about 40 on that boat. It's worth pointing out that in the last 7 days, the average amount of people per dinghy is between 65 and 69. So that's actually relatively lightly laden. And with numbers like that, Kevin, it surely is only a matter of time before we see another disaster in the Channel. Kevin Saunders, thank you very much for joining us. Yeah, thank you very much for joining us, Kevin Saunders. Always a pleasure to have your company. Thank you. Now, coming up, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, sits down with GB News' political editor, Christopher Hope, and you don't want to miss it.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m, followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain, followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Question is,
should our museums stay free for everyone and anyone, or should we be charging our tourists?
So many of the artefacts are from around the world, stolen actually. I think it's almost to add insult to injury to ask people to pay to see the artefacts that were taken without their permission. One of the things that the museum set itself up for is a kind of World Heritage where you can see the stuff they took from your country free of charge. Because the British state's willing to do that, is one of the reasons why we hold on to many of the artefacts from around the world instead of giving them back.
I mean, that's a noble argument, Wayman, but none of the other countries in the world that also contain artefacts from all over the world indulge in that, do they? We still have to pay to see anything that's come from the UK that might be overseas?
No, but the absolute truth is that we've stolen a lot more over many more years than anybody else. Because we're we had a very, very big empire, and during that time, taking things from other countries without their permission.
And I think our wonderful country, the United Kingdom, is the cradle of modern civilization, not of the ancient world, but of the modern world. You know, for centuries, we've contributed things to the world, which has spread out around the world, and the influence that we've put upon countries around the globe has been massively significant. I think it's a privilege for people to be able to come to this country and track the history of our country through our museums. I can't understand why they've ever been free. The upkeep of museums runs into hundreds of millions of pounds a year. Somebody's got to maintain them and keep them good. Somebody's got to go around the world and collect the artifacts which are in our museums. And I've always had the adage in life, if something is free, it's probably not worth having.
The People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The 12th, a day to celebrate history, community and family here in Northern Ireland. Join me, Arlene Foster.
And me, Dougie Beattie, as we bring you live coverage of the July 12th celebrations from the beautiful city of Belfast.
And right across the United Kingdom. It's all happening here on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight. I'm Martin Daubney. The Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is still in Washington today for the NATO Leaders Summit, and our own political editor, Christopher Hope, caught up with him this morning to ask some tough questions 1 week on from Labour's landslide victory.
Joe Biden linked, didn't he, closer ties with Europe with strengthening a special relationship and not, didn't he? Is that the point? So you think perhaps getting closer to the European Union could help the special relationship?
Well, I've been clear with international leaders here that we do want to reset the relationship with each of the individual countries, whether they're EU or not, but more broadly. And of course, you know, this being a NATO summit, NATO is the cornerstone of our defence in Europe, and you know, working with our European allies on defence has never been more important than it is at the moment.
Yes, you saw Joe Biden close too. Yeah. George Clooney thinks he shouldn't serve 4 more years as president. What do you think? Has he got up to the job? I was with him on a bilateral for, well, it was going to be 45 minutes. It ended up being the best part of an hour. Right. We went through a number of issues at pace, strategic issues that I was keen, and he was keen that we you know, thrash out and talk through. He was on good form. Yeah. And we covered 4 more years, no problem?
Well, look, he was on very good form, and I was very pleased to have that opportunity to discuss these issues with him. And not least this question of our special relationship, which is very important to him, very important to me, and very important to our two countries.
Well, there's lots to pick apart there, isn't there? And joining me now with the latest live from Washington, D.C. is that man, GB News' political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, welcome to the show. Can we please start with the European Union? We've been thinking for a long time that this NATO summit actually is a way for Keir Starmer to cosy up to a few of those European Union member state leaders, and that's precisely what's happened. Chris, in a nutshell, is this Keir Starmer basically getting us back into Brexit via the back door, one summit at a time?
Well, Martin, you are cynical, of course, but maybe that's what they might admit amongst the top echelons of the Labour government, because they've been very clear they want a better deal with the European Union, and that means doing more work together. We've heard from John Healey. He's the Defence Secretary travelling out here with Sir Keir Starmer. He's made very clear he wants more defence cooperation, some military cooperation even, and that won't undermine the NATO summit that I'm at here in Washington, D.C. All eyes for the top people in the Labour government as this NATO summit ends. There'll be a press conference later on tonight with the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, but they're looking at this Blenheim summit, this Blenheim meeting of 44 or so European countries. We are hosting it as the UK, and that'll be a meeting at which the UK will seek to deepen relationships with countries that had been tested during those difficult Brexit years. So yeah, that's the point. And you heard from Joe Biden in the Oval Office where I was last night with Keir Starmer, and he said there, didn't he, Joe Biden, that he thinks a special relationship is a knot which bonds together the UK, the USA and the European Union, and that's the point. The US wants Britain to be closer to the EU and provide that bridge into knowing what the EU are up to, and I think that's where I think the US wants Britain to take its relationship with the EU. But some Brexiteers, and I'm talking to a former Brexit Party MEP in you, Martin, some people may not be happy with that.
But the fact of the matter remains that David Lammy, who's also there, the Foreign Secretary, lest we forget, a man who wanted to reverse Brexit, just like the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, he's been very clear. He wants new deals on energy, climate change and even illegal immigration. But, Chris, we won't get a say in this. We won't get a vote. We won't get a referendum. We'll get political declarations. This is death by 1,000 treaties.
Well, not treaties, that would be different, because the only treaties we sign up to, we are not going to rejoin the single market as a country or the customs union or the EU. We know that from the Labour manifesto, from when everyone voted on that last Thursday. But what will happen, as you say, around the edges, there'll be increased cooperation, and the big risk is going to be we turn into something like Norway on sea. Norway, of course, is subject to all sorts of European Union laws, but can't have any say over changing them, and that's the risk, I think, which this Labour government is taking by teaming up and getting closer on some areas of regulation. Will become a rule taker, not a rule maker. In the old money, Martin, it was governed by facts, and that's not a great place to be.
Chris, let's talk now about Joe Biden. He was on great form, said Sir Keir Starmer, which is a stark contrast to what many of Biden's own supporters have been saying. In fact, George Clooney said today that the dam has broken. We can no longer put our heads in the sand and pray for a miracle in November. Big donors speaking out about their concerns. Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker, saying it's time for a rethink. CNN, the supportive media, question marks all over Joe Biden's ability, apart from Sir Keir Starmer.
Well, Sir Keir Starmer's got to work with the US president. They're much more aligned, Democratic leader with the Labour leader, of course, and then that's why they spoke, as you heard in the clip there, the interview that I did for GB News with Sir Keir Starmer. They spoke for an hour, not 45 minutes. But yeah, it was fascinating for me as a journalist walking into the Oval Office, having watched the West Wing on the TV for so long, and then be able to ask a question for GB News of Joe Biden. I mean, I couldn't really come out and ask about his health condition. That's one for maybe for US journalists to ask about their leader. But I was able to ask him, had he watched the soccer? I know Martin wouldn't approve of that, but football is a different game over here. So the soccer, he said, I heard, yeah. And I said, yeah, it's good news, Mr. President. And that allowed others to ask, of course, Sir Keir Starmer whether it was coming home. And in my interview with Sir Keir Starmer today, I did jokingly say, if it doesn't come home, Prime Minister, will you resign? Well, of course, he said no, but he will be over there in Berlin this weekend, cheering the Three Lions on and hoping we can finally win the Euros, and particularly a competition in football on foreign soil, which we've never done. But I personally found Joe Biden looking pretty healthy. He looked tanned. He looked very different to that bleached out figure on the CNN debate, which so many of us saw and couldn't believe how, frankly, old he looked and doddery. He looked a bit more with it, and I wonder whether, well, I mean, he's going to try and stop people like the actor George Clooney undermining his role as president. But of course, he's an actor. He's very tightly wound into the Democratic establishment. When he starts saying things, it might become more and more difficult. But over here, only a handful of, I think 6 or so House Democrats have said that he should stand down, and there's no real mechanism to force him out if he refuses to go.
Now, Chris, you say he looks a bit more tan. I think he might have been to the same electric beach as Donald Trump. And on that point, direction of travel appears to be that in November, Donald Trump might get back in. How do you think that special relationship might operate between Sir Keir Starmer and David Lammy, lest we forget, who called Donald Trump a fascist sympathiser and a misogynist? That could be a very, very awkward first meeting.
Yeah, David Lammy, for viewers and listeners, of course, is the current Foreign Secretary replacing David Cameron, and he has made a job of it, really, to attack Donald Trump in recent years. We heard back in 2018 he called Donald Trump a woman-hating, neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath who's a profound threat to the international order. In 2021, he said Donald Trump was an enemy of democracy. He said every British politician who failed to condemn his actions after the presidential election should issue an apology tonight. Same year, he called his entire presidency, he said, was a reign of recklessness, narcissism and delusion. And he said just finally, if any president in history of the US deserved to be impeached twice, it's Donald Trump. Now, I think privately, David Lammy feels that, these things were said by lots of politicians on the left back then, and I'm sure they can get over it. And in fact, people who observe Trump very closely out here have been telling me on this trip that Trump's quite used to being attacked by left-wing politicians. It's water off a duck's back. But I do think those remarks, and I thought so at the time actually, were unwise of the current Foreign Secretary. Of course, he is the Foreign Affairs spokesman for the party, and he shouldn't really be shooting from the lip. Now he's our chief diplomat travelling the world stage. But he may not like this, David Lammy, but of course Nigel Farage told GB News last week that he had persuaded Team Trump to engage with David Lammy to help get him back on board, because even Farage could admit that we have to have a good relationship between our chief diplomat, David Lammy, and the team around Trump, even if he does use what is somewhat undiplomatic language about someone who could be the next president of the United States.
All of which begs the question, could Mr Farage become more of a conduit between Sir Keir Starmer's government and Donald Trump's presidency? If that happens, what a prospect that is. Chris Hope, you're doing God's work there in Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for joining us, as ever. Superb. Thank you. Now, in a moment, after England's sensational Euros semi-final win against the Netherlands last night, we'll be asking Big Sam Allardyce if football's finally coming home on Sunday.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. It looks like it'll be a pretty cloudy day for most of us on Friday. There's a risk of some very heavy showers across the southwest as well. Now, for most of us, high pressure is building in just for a time for the end of the week and into the start of the weekend. That means it will turn that much drier through the next few days, but there's still a risk of some showers. And through this evening, I think central areas are most likely to see the cloudiest skies and a risk of some rain through this evening. Also, some areas of rain might move into the far southeast from the near continent. Where skies remain clear, though, to the north, across parts of Scotland, it could be a bit of a fresh start down into the lower single figures by tomorrow morning. But for most of us, a fairly mild start. But as I said, sunshine is going to be a little bit limited through Friday. A northerly wind drags cloud in, perhaps some more heavy rain to the far northwest of Scotland throughout Friday morning. Some sunny spells, though, coming through for Northern Ireland, southwestern areas of Scotland. Also, some areas of northeastern England as well, but here we've got a northerly wind and that's going to keep the temperatures down through the day. And as I said, there is a risk of showers across the south coast throughout the day, particularly as we head into the afternoon into the southwest. We could see some thundery, heavy downpours. But for most of us elsewhere, it should stay dry through Friday. Quite a lot of cloud around though, so with that lack of sunshine, it's not going to be a particularly warm feeling day. And we could see some heavier rain move into the east coast of northern England later on in the day. So for most of us, temperatures in the high teens at best, possibly scraping 20 or 21 degrees in the far southeast. Saturday, there's little in the way of change. We've still got this rain lingering across eastern coasts of northern England and parts of Scotland, and once again we could see some fairly heavy showers breaking out across parts of Wales and southwestern England. But in any sunshine, it will feel quite warm over the weekend, particularly as we head towards Sunday, when I think it will be a bit of a drier day and we could see temperatures climbing into the low 20s.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said storm.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight with me, Martin Daubney. Now, after last night's nail-biting victory over the Netherlands, the Three Lions will take on Spain now in the final of Euro 2024 on Sunday at 8 p.m. So, after 58 long, tortuous years without a major trophy, is football finally coming home this weekend? Well, first, to soak up the atmosphere ahead of the final, we're joined now by... in Berlin, we're joined now by GB News reporter Jack Carson, who is live in Berlin. Jack, you're there. You've been following the team for the last few games. Last night, lastminute.com, but we're there. What's the mood on the ground?
I mean, it's just anticipation, I think, now, Martin, ahead of this final. I mean, what a way to do it, really. In the final minute of the game, Ollie Watkins, it was a really brave decision, wasn't it, from Gareth Southgate to bring off your captain, Harry Kane, in the 81st minute of the game in a semi-final when, at that point, at 1-1, you know, the Netherlands had been the better side in the second half. It looked all the while, didn't it, that it was going to go to extra time. So to bring off Harry Kane that early was a bit of a brave decision from Southgate, and he has maybe been criticised for his substitutions in this tournament so far. But the two substitutes, Cole Palmer and Ollie Ollie Watkins were the two that linked up, which meant Ollie Watkins, of course, scored that fantastic goal across the keeper to make it 2-1. I mean, you know, he described after the game that when he ran away in that celebration, it was like he was in slow motion. Of course, Ollie Watkins himself, 10 years ago today, was playing for Western-super-Mare in the Conference South on loan from Exeter City, and yesterday, 10 years later, he's just scored the goal to send England here to Berlin on Sunday for its second consecutive European Championship final. I mean, it really was a fantastic performance from England, a lot better than what we've seen in previous games. Of course, Gareth Southgate decided to stick with that back three, the only change being Mark Gay, who came back in, of course, after his suspension. Probably a bit unfair on Ezri Konsa, who would look fantastic in the quarter-final, but of course, Gareth Southgate knew how he wanted to set up, he knew how he wanted to play, and we really did look quite good. But of course, in Dortmund, we talked about it, didn't we, Martin? There were tens of thousands, 110,000, it was confirmed, Dutch fans in Dortmund. It was just a sea of orange all day, but England were the ones that were the loudest and chanting the loudest in Dortmund after the full-time whistle. We caught up with a few fans after the result in Dortmund yesterday.
Unbelievable, mate, honestly. Unbelievable. It's coming home. It's coming home.
We've already got rooms in Berlin, so we're going. We've been to every game. I've got tickets for the Slovakia game. It's coming home. It's got to be.
Feeling fantastic. We're going into the final. What else is there to say? It's coming home. Definitely coming home. 100% coming home.
I ain't got a flight home. After the quarter, I didn't book a flight home. So after this now, I said I won't book a flight home till England go home. So now.
I'm originally from England, obviously, from Portsmouth. I'm a Pompey boy, but I lived like 33 years in Holland. I've been twice to the UK, twice to England games, Serbia in Gelsenkirchen and in Cologne. But I had to do this for my boys because, they're born here, they're bred here. They're half English, I'm full English, and I'm so proud of them. We made a decision to do it. I even have to buy a shirt because I'm an Englishman, but
it's just cost me another 500 baht to go to Berlin now.
Saka, running down the wing, Saka, making English sing, Saka, we're all going to Berlin. Bukayo, Saka, running down the wing, Saka.
Well, that has been the chant, hasn't it, Martin, of this whole tournament, that Bukayo Saka chant. He was fantastic again in that right wing back position. It's not his natural position, but he still managed to contain, those Dutch attacking players. Now, of course, Gareth Southgate has already said that ahead of this this final on Sunday, Spain are going to be a huge task. They've probably got the player of the tournament in their side. Lamine Yamal, the 16-year-old, became the youngest ever scorer in a European Championship when, of course, he helped Spain get to the final. And there are going to be tens of thousands of England fans, Martin, in Berlin, in Germany this weekend as we have another European Championship final.
Jack Carson, well done on two counts. First of all, you found fans sober enough to talk, and secondly, they didn't swear. Jack Carson live in Berlin, always a pleasure. Enjoy that final. We're now joined by the former England manager, Big Sam Allardyce. Big Sam, absolute delight to talk to you. Can we talk about a different England team last night, Big Sam? They had the same names on the back of their shirts, but the team seemed completely and utterly transformed. Finally, we saw the England we've been waiting for. How do you think that happened?
I think that confidence has grown as the tournament's gone on, without a doubt. And while we're playing a lot of the players the same, we played the last two games in a different system. And again, yesterday's system was slightly different to the one against Switzerland, where we finally found Phil Foden in the midfield area with Jude Bellingham, and that worked absolutely wonders, particularly in the first half, of course. And I think it's great credit to changing the system again, which is a big ask when you're the international manager, to go from one system to the other. But the players have handled the last two games exceptionally well. And it seems the system has suited them better than the normal 4-2-3-1, of course. So full marks to them. And again, this time substitutions coming early. I was slightly concerned for the first 10 or 15, maybe 20 minutes of the second half that we needed to make a substitute, maybe even then, because Holland were on the move. They were getting forward and creating chances. unlike the first half where they were really, really struggling. So you've got to give credit to Ronald Koeman with his tactical change. But then Gareth changed his tactics, brought his substitutes on, and finally got the winner, which I think overall we deserved, of course. And can I just say, all this rubbish about this penalty that wasn't a penalty. Well, it was a penalty. You know why? Because it was a foul. And if it's a foul outside the box and it's a foul inside the box, it's a foul. So it was a penalty. So harsh or not harsh, luck or no luck for England, we all need a bit of luck. It was a great result in the end. And I think that all the credit particularly should go to Gareth and his staff this time. You know, I've criticised him, everybody's criticised him. I think constructively when I do it in terms of bringing substitutes on or playing quicker than they played, and certainly they showed that particularly in the first half. And now they're in the final. They've broken all records, but we want them to win it, of course. Having the first major final away from home in their history is something special. But it will be very disappointing now on Sunday if we don't go all the way.
Now, Big Sam, it's a big night ahead, of course, on Sunday. Spain, they're looking phenomenal from the very first match. They look really, really tasty. But are we peaking at the right time? It seems to me, Sam, that the journey, we're just getting to that sweet spot right when we need it. What's your prediction?
The sweet spot, definitely. The prediction is got to be 2-1 for England. Probably, though, after extra time.
But please, not penalties. And can I quickly say, all the Dutch media and also Ronald Koeman moaning about that penalty, we all remember 1993, don't we, when he blatantly pulled down David Platt. Maybe there's a bit of karma there, Sam.
Well, a bit of karma. It's taken long enough to pay him back, Matt, of course, because if that wasn't a sending off, I don't know what was a sending off. Listen, people will debate whether it was a foul or not. In the end, the right man made the right decision. And whatever we say, the referee gave a penalty, and that's the end of it.
Now, Big Sam, can I quickly ask you about the media hostility? You're a big name, you've had a lot of big stick in your time. Southgate got a lot of stick during this tournament. I was one of them. You were too. When those pint pots came onto that pitch, do you think actually that hostility from the crowd, from the media, helped to galvanise the unit? They've rallied around the manager. They formed a nucleus, and what we saw last night, they delivered on that.
Oh. Internally, yes, they'll all be very determined and keep it obviously amongst themselves, but they'll have a united front. So they'll have this mentality about we'll show you. I mean, you know, really, press are one of the sometimes the downsides of the England job, of course, because the pressure that's heaped on and the scrutiny sometimes plays the wrong part in what you want England to be. I know all the journalists want England to win. Yes, they do. But sometimes some of the hostility they pick out is a little over the top, but you have to accept that. If you're going to be in that position like Gareth is, like I was very shortly, you're ready to accept it. What you want to do is get your players to go and do it on the field for you. They need to do the talking for you. And certainly England are doing the talking for Gareth, his backroom staff and all the players that are concerned in this tournament. And good luck to them on Sunday. We wish them all the very, very best.
Well, Big Sam, it's D-Day in Berlin. Whoops, I mentioned the war. Sunday night, 8 o'clock. I'm sure we can deliver. Thank you very much for your company. Always an absolute pleasure. 2-1 to England in extra time. You heard it there first from Big Sam Allardyce. Thanks, mate. Always a pleasure. Still to come, as the government prepares to release offenders early to prevent overcrowding, will their plans to encourage businesses to hire ex-cons really cut down on reoffending? Or could this turn into a total disaster?
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Welcome back. Stefan Kyriazis has, as ever, been to the theatre and saw one of the most successful performers of the modern age, one who has made his name in different genres on television and is always a magnetic presence on the stage. About whom are we talking, Stefan?
We're talking about James Corden at the Old Vic
for the constituent, and it's traverse staging. So audience on either side, and it's a fantastic experience. But also it's been done this time to bring everything in a lot and make it quite intimate, because you just have one simple set. It's just a table, office space. This is a new play by Joe Penhall, and it's addressing very, very current issues of safety, especially for people in public service, doctors, nurses, teachers, and of course, as you know, politicians that are at risk and being attacked. So we have Joe Cox, Sir David Ames, and we have politicians talking about cancelling their surgeries, not wanting to appear in public, teachers being threatened. And James Corden plays an ex-serviceman who is going through a difficult divorce, dealing with a lot of PTSD, also feeling very much like fathers are overlooked, and he wants to fight for their rights. And an old school friend is a local MP, played by Anna Maxwell Martin. And he goes in to start talking to her, and it starts off quite chummy and jovial, and then it darkens and darkens. He gets quite aggressive and frustrated. She wants to help. She's an absolute idealist. This politician sense of we don't choose who we work for. You know, we are here by duty to work for everybody in our constituency. It spirals a lot. I have to say, Corden, sensational. Really? He really is a fantastic actor. Of all of them, he's so natural, and he has the most difficult role where his character is shifting all the time and becomes potentially quite threatening and dangerous, but then there's also a beautiful catharsis at the end.
The People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GBN Tonight. I'm Martin Daubney. Now, with Britain's prisons at absolute breaking point, the government is reportedly announcing emergency measures tomorrow, which will see offenders released early to prevent overcrowding. But with hundreds of ex-prisoners back on the streets, what is Labour's plan to stop re-offending? Well, according to The Times, they'll tell businesses to pick up the slack by encouraging companies to hire more former inmates. But is this a recipe for disaster? Well, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, shrugged off concerns when speaking to GB News' political editor Christopher Hope earlier today.
I can't build a prison in 7 days with the best will in the world. It is clearly a problem left by the last government. There's no issue about that. You cannot be in this terrible state. And they ignored the problem, didn't fix the problem. We are going to have to fix it. We're going to have to make short-term measures, and we'll announce that in due course. And then, of course, we'll have to do the further measures. But I simply can't build a prison in 7 days. This is a terrible failure of government by the last government.
Well, is this the right thing for Britain? I'm joined now by Winston Davis, who's a former prisoner and a business owner. Winston, it's always a pleasure to have your company. You're a young man who's turned your life around, got back on track. Is the road to redemption for ex-cons to be given a foot up in the job market?
I mean, look, we're talking about two different things here. There's one is saying that there isn't enough space in the prison system, and the Conservative government, they warned about this February 2020, that was going to be running out of spaces in 22-23. We're now running out of spaces. Something has to be done immediately, as the Prime Minister just saying in your clip. But then in terms of this side of employing prisoners, but when I was away, I had this desire in me that I wanted to change. I wanted to get on. I wanted to move on. And since then, I trained as a gas engineer 15, 16 years ago, and I've built successful businesses and employed hundreds of people. My self-determination did it for me. But my challenge with just release people and just get them into work, challenge is this. Like 50% of people that come out of prison don't have the literacy age of an 11-year-old. 42% of them were excluded from school. A third of them identify as having a disability or learning difficulty. So when you've got those factors, you're saying, oh, just get them into work. Actually, you've got to be doing the work whilst they're in prison, whilst you've got them there, to rehabilitate them, to get them into the place where they're ready to work. So the two things don't really go hand in hand. You don't say, oh, just to let you out and get a job, because people who have substance misuse abuses still going on. They're going to have challenges to have resolved, and they might not have the skills to come out, especially with lockdown. You've got people that are coming out of prison from lockdown who had no education, no training, no nothing. And actually, it's a big recipe for problems.
OK, Winston, so James Timpson, the prison minister, probably no surprise he advocates for this. Timpson, the locksmith, of course, has employed thousands of ex-inmates over the years, so it's a template that he finds works for him. But you're pointing out, Winston, as a man who with inside knowledge, there could be problems. A lot of people are very concerned that having former offenders in their local business could mean they could reoffend near to them, and they're being given preferential treatment in a job market. For example, former veterans, armed service veterans, they're not given the same break in life. Why should veterans get that?
Well, just to touch on veterans briefly, somewhere between 5 and 15% of all prisoners that are in prison now are former serving forces. So actually, they do form some of that group. But in terms of reoffending in employment, only 16% of prisoners coming out will have a job within 6 weeks. Only 23% will have a job within 6 months. And then we've got the reoffending rate. If people, and it's an £18 billion a year cost to reoffending, if people have a job when they come out, they are between a third and 50% less likely to reoffend than if they were when they come out with nothing. So it's a situation to go in. Do we want to get people back into work, get them rehabilitated, and get them cracking on, or do we want to continue this cycle of reoffending? I think the key is James Timpson is been smashing it. He's got the Timpson's group, which he employed prisoners and serving prisoners. He's been instrumental in developing the employment education advisory boards in prisons, which are acting as a bridge between business and the prisons. So he's been instrumental in that. He's done a lot of work prior to getting to this role, and I do believe that he's the man to help sort this issue out.
OK, well, Winston Davis, as I always say to you when I speak to you, you're a credit to yourself, you've turned your life around, and you're the kind of role model that former cons should be looking to. Winston Davis, thank you very much for joining us on GBN tonight. You take care. Cheers. Now, as we saw earlier, Nigel Farage has only just been sworn in as the new MP for Clacton, and now he's getting down to business. This morning, he announced a series of significant changes to Reform's leadership, and already it's caused something of a row. Well, GB News reporter Adam Cherry joins me in the studio with the latest. So, it's only a week into the Reform, the infamous five getting in, and already we're seeing the first signs of an internal fallout. Tell us more.
True, yeah, so let's look at the big picture here. So what we had today was Nigel Farage flexing his muscles as the leader. The deputy leader, the former deputy leader, Ben Habib, is out of his position. Yeah. So he's been moved aside. Remember, he didn't win his seat. The man who did win one of the 5 seats is Richard Tice, who was previously the chairman. Yeah. Now he becomes the deputy leader in Habib's place. And the new chairman is a chap called Zia Youssef, who's appeared on this channel, and we've discussed him before. Yep. Rising star within the party, didn't stand as a candidate this time, but clearly seen as a significant player, and they wanted to reward him and provide him a seat at the table, so to speak. And Habib is the one who's lost out here. And he's saying he's considering his position within the broader party and is upset about it. I mean, I think it looks like Nigel Farage has made this position clear for him. The problem Ben Habib has, as I said, is he didn't win his seat, and I think it was a mistake to stand in Wellingborough, where I'm from, because he knew, having stood in the by-election about 6 months ago in February, where he came third, he knew he was up against it there. And, Reform is a small party. He could have stood in one of those 98 other seats. Obviously, he didn't know 98 other seats he was going to come second in, but there were clearly options available to him, and he made the wrong choice there. So a bit of a row, Habib upset, but that's politics, right?
Yeah, and Ben Habib put a statement out on Twitter. He said, "I've just been informed by Nigel Farage that Richard Tice is taking over as deputy leader of the party. Consequently, I no longer hold that position. I'm considering my position more generally in light of this change. I've long held concerns about the control of the party and the decision-making processes. I will reflect on all of this. The key for me is that Reform UK stays true to the promises made to the British people. The movement we have created does not belong to us. It belongs to the people. We are obliged and indebted to the British people. Now, Adam, I sat next to Ben Habib in Brussels. He was a Brexit Party MEP for the London region. I was West Midlands. And I know Ben Habib is a man with hot blood. I also know Ben Habib is a man with huge loyalty. I wonder if this is him flexing his muscles, but actually he'll come round and show loyalty.
Yeah, possibly. This is, as the party have made very clear, and Farage specifically, it's a 5-year process, and I'm sure he'll be back in some form. Just a bit bruised by the experience this morning. But I'd say that's politics. And you see this, funnily enough, when Downing Street, as we saw last week, when Downing Street have to do a similar thing, they have a whiteboard of hundreds of names, and lots of people get left out and get upset. This is a slightly smaller scale, but it still happens in either way. You know, you don't get what you want, and you rebuild, and maybe you come back at a later time. And I wouldn't be surprised if we do see Ben Habib again in some capacity.
Well, he's very, very highly thought of, that's for sure, you know, by GBNews viewers and Reform Party activists. I know that. He's a great campaigner, he's a good foot soldier, and I think he'll probably come round and do the loyal thing, but, you know, maybe he should have chosen a different seat. But I think he'd be greatly missed by the party. If he's on the outside, I don't think that'll happen. Adam Sherry, thank you very much for joining me in the studio. Absolute pleasure. Now, coming up is State of the Nation with Jacob Rees-Mogg. I'm sure he will have loads to say. We're all talking about who's going to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. Will we get any more from Jacob Rees-Mogg? Well, I've asked him about 6 times. He hasn't told me a dick a bird. That's coming next. State of the Nation with Jacob. But first, here's your weather with Annie Shuttleworth. I'll be back tomorrow, 3 till 6.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you from the Met Office. It looks like it'll be a pretty cloudy day for most of us on Friday. There's a risk of some very heavy showers across the southwest as well. Now, for most of us, high pressure is building in just for a time for the end of the week and into the start of the weekend. That means it will turn that much drier through the next few days, but there's still a risk of some showers. And through this evening, I think central areas are most likely to see the cloudiest skies and a risk of some rain through this evening. Also, some areas of rain might move into the far southeast from the near continent. Where skies remain clear, though, to the north, across parts of Scotland, it could be a bit of a fresh start down into the lower single figures by tomorrow morning. But for most of us, a fairly mild start. But as I said, sunshine is going to be a little bit limited through Friday. A northerly wind drags cloud in, perhaps some more heavy rain to the far northwest of Scotland throughout Friday morning. Some sunny spells, though, coming through for Northern Ireland, southwestern areas of Scotland. Also, some areas of northeastern England as well, but here we've got a northerly wind, and that's going to keep the temperatures down through the day. And as I said, there is a risk of showers across the south coast throughout the day, particularly as we head into the afternoon into the southwest. We could see some thundery, heavy downpours. But for most of us elsewhere, it should stay dry through Friday. Quite a lot of cloud around, though, so with that lack of sunshine, it's not going to be a particularly warm feeling day. And we could see some heavier rain move into the east coast of northern England later on in the day. So for most of us, temperatures in the high teens at best, possibly scraping 20 or 21 degrees in the far southeast. Saturday, there's little